All eyes are on the stock market as it continues its decline through this outbreak. Today, the Dow actually rebounded. It was up 188 points at the close. CBS 6's Leanne DeRosa spoke with a professor who has done research about the market and a financial advisor who has some advice for those who invest.
The stock market is on a roller coaster ride through the coronavirus outbreak.
It's a very uncertain time. This is an unprecedented economic shock.
Thomas Shofi, an assistant professor at RPI, started analyzing the coronavirus's effect on corporations in mid-February. He says there were warning signs of a decline. He noticed about 40% of firms discussing potential disruptions to their supply chain. As the virus spread, those fears surged.
Now we're at the point where we've had this tremendous volatility in the market decline, and concern about the virus is pervasive through basically every corporate communication.
Shofi says there are three things to look out for to get the market to stabilize: how the Federal Reserve supports the banks and lending, physical stimulus with the president's economic relief program, and how the virus will run its course.
When you hear things that we could be back to normal within a month or two, I think the market is more encouraged about that. When you hear things about, say, 18 months, that's what freaks people out and leads to more of this volatility.
So what does this mean for you at home? We spoke with wealth advisor.
Banking stress test is basically just a mechanism for regulators to feel more confident about the banking system. They are implemented mainly for large banks, which means that currently, the way it is implemented today, it only takes into account less than 16 banks. Some critics actually believe that this added regulatory compliance causes banks to invest a lot of time and resources. And what we actually find is that they're not necessarily costly to the banks. By having these transparency requirements, you are actually helping the banks in the eyes of the investors, right? Because now the investors feel more comfortable investing in these banks, and as a result, they are willing to provide their capital at a lower cost, and in turns, they can actually increase their lending as a result, and that would benefit the banking system in general. Having a healthy banking system is important for the whole economy, given that the banking system provides funds for investment in terms of like small business loans or mortgages, or even to fund, for example, your studies as if you're a student in college. So these type of regulations actually highlight the importance of transparency in order to generate and create more innovations in the financial world.
I'm thrilled to bring this cutting-edge financial technology center to Rensselaer. My name is Aparna Gupta. I am the director of our existing Center for Financial Studies and the future director for the National Science Foundation funded center called CyberSmart, Center for Risks and Advances in Financial Technologies. The mission of CyberSmart is to identify the research challenges that industry faces at the interface of technology and finance. Looking to the future, finance will involve more and more technology. Separating finance from technology is going to be impossible, to the point that technology is going to drive and define where finance goes forward as an industry. Lally, as a business school and a technology-driven university, has always been engaged in doing research that supports technological innovation. If you look at the history of Rensselaer, it has always been at the leading edge of technologies. From information technology, biotechnology to nanotechnology. And now when we are in the age of financial technologies, where technology is driving finance at the very core, Rensselaer has to be at the forefront of it. That's why it is important for Rensselaer.
The point is to educate people and have them understand what's fake and what's not, and this is what our study is focused on. So the more educated people are about consuming fake news, the better we are. The main finding is that the novelty of the news topic and the specific explanation that the AI provides matter in terms of whether people are going to believe the AI or not, or accept the advice of the AI or not. There's a lot of work that's done on developing really good AI recommendation systems, and developing algorithms that really figure out what's good, what's fake, and what's not fake. But if people don't believe that AI, then it's a whole lot of good resources being wasted. It's really important for the AI to stay on top of the news, and as soon as there's an emerging topic, to set the right mindset of people as to what's right and wrong in this topic.
Scammers are especially busy these days, evolving with the pandemic, always quick to come up with new ways to try to get your information or your money. This is harvest time for scammers. The pandemic provides plenty of opportunities.
Especially because of two main factors, fear and desperation. And so because people are home, they are afraid, they are unemployed, they are bored, scammers pretend to present them with solutions to these problems.
Kofi Arhin is a PhD student in information systems in the RPI Lally School of Management. New scams involve selling everything from fake treatment for the coronavirus to fraudulent COVID-19 products like masks or testing kits. Also, fake fundraising for victims or offers to work from home.
In certain situations, they are going to ask you for your personal information. So if they can get your social security, for instance, they can redirect your stimulus check or any other benefit they can get from having a social security number.
As always, experts warn you should never click on a link or download an attachment from a suspicious email, and to be aware that phishing scams use emails that can look as if they're from real government agencies.
So the general rule of thumb is to prevent any form of interaction that requires you to give out your personal information or pay money. If you feel obliged, fact check as if your life depended on it, because literally it does.
Coronavirus-related complaints can be reported to the National Center for Disaster Fraud. Arhin says be especially careful and expect an uptick in scams over the next week or so, because scammers know that they have to act quickly to try to get their hands on your stimulus checks. In Troy, Kumi Tucker, News Channel 13.
I love numbers a lot. I love human behavior a lot. For many people, these two things are completely opposite. In my research, I try to bring them together. Generally, we think that numbers are used for quantitative numerical information. But how many of us actually know that numbers have a language of their own? What my research found is that using specific numbers versus round numbers in communication messages can nudge people in different ways. What my research does, it provides a tool. And that tool can be used by various industries. It can be used by marketers to sell their product more and more to the consumers. It can be used by public policy makers to actually encourage healthy behavior among individuals. People can be motivated to take more healthy decisions or unhealthy decisions based on the numbers that are being used in a communication message. We look at the current pandemic situation. We see that there are a lot of messages which are around us which tell us to take more preventive actions. My work will actually inform the developers of these messages, because only by changing people's behavior we can change the world.
First hit New York, attorney and mom Jennifer Corcoran was forced to make some big changes. The partner at Tully Rinke and Colony had to work from home, and with a young son, it came with some challenges.
Seeing mommy 6 feet away, can't you play? Can't we go for a walk? You know, to have to say, no, buddy, mommy is still at work. I actually got to a point in probably early June where I said, you know what, I really need to be back in the office.
But for some moms, working from home during the pandemic might actually help advance their careers. At least that's what Timothy Golden thinks. He's a professor in the Lally School of Management at RPI and a leading expert in the field of telecommuting.
It used to be that working from home had a stigma associated with it. Perhaps a young mother with children chose to work from home.
Golden points to the fact that societal pressures have typically stunted the careers of working moms, especially white-collar employees who have had to make difficult choices between work and home life. But COVID-19 has made working from home much more acceptable for both women and men.
But how will this help women advance in their careers directly?
So now a woman can compete with a man as equally as if they were in the office. and as equally as if they did or did not have family care responsibilities. And so that's really good news for women.
As for Jennifer, she's now back at the office. So what's her take on Professor Golden's findings?
But honestly, at the end of the day, I think it depends upon the employer. You know, I think it would be a great opportunity for women to be able to go up the rungs of the ladder. But I think there's also going to be some employers that still view it as we're doing something special for you. And that, unfortunately, always kind of leads to a less than employee, even if it's not true.
Anya Tucker, News 10 ABC.
In the heydays of computing programming, when we had these huge mainframes, women were the default programmers. So there was like 65-70% of programmers were women employees. Nowadays, they're around 23%, so that's worrying. There are hardly any women CEOs in the top IT firms. So they may not be seeing any role models that they can aspire to or look forward to, which is why I thought it was even more important to understand what affects promotability in men versus women in IT companies. Surprisingly, I found that women had a higher likelihood of promotions, all else being equal. So that was very interesting and surprising. I think it is possible that women are supposed to be better managers because they're more warm-hearted, maybe they are more process-oriented, and therefore they were better able to manage these teams. An unfortunate truth also is that there are wage differences between men and women. So if you're looking at a higher level of the organizational ladder, it is likely that women will be paid less, so maybe that's why they are being promoted. We don't know that. We need more research into that. My research also found that training was a surprising arm in the arsenal that women have, that they can actually signal to their employers or the senior managers that they are actually ready and able, and they can get to higher levels of the organizational hierarchy. And that was fascinating. Women should definitely pursue their careers in IT. And to do that, of course, they should enroll in more IT programs like at RPI.
Venture out of their homes, especially this weekend. The need for face masks is expected to significantly increase. News 10 Samantha Damasio speaking to a local analytics professor about the stress that demand is having on the supply chain.
At the start of the pandemic, masks were not considered necessary unless you were working in close contact with someone who was infected. But that has since been revised, and as we start to reopen and people begin to venture out of their homes, masks are now a must.
The mask can make the difference between the life and death.
Hakan Hekimolu, assistant professor of supply chain management and analytics at RPI, says that sudden shift is putting a significant strain on the supply chain.
The COVID has exposed some of the good practices as well as the bad practices in supply chain management. And though I cannot easily blame it on the companies, because it has been a tremendous shock from the demand side as well.
He tells me the demand for face masks has not even peaked yet. While most large manufacturing companies have been focused on producing N95s for healthcare and essential workers, as we begin to reopen, he says they will have to start producing masks for the general public too.
Planning for the worst might not be the economically most effective way for companies, but we are in a public health situation, and this is a time for everyone, including the companies, to step up.
We've seen many people sewing up a storm at home and doing what they can to feed the need. And a number of local businesses have also shifted their operations to produce reusable face masks. But Hekimolu says from a supplier's perspective, there's still so much uncertainty.
Well, let's say they invest in the capacity to provide face masks for let's say, with a plan for the next 2 years. And after 6 months or 3 months, if the coronavirus goes away, then it's going to be a sunk investment for the companies.
Samantha Damasio, News 10, ABC.
Hello, my name is Tong Chen. I and the 3 other team members have joined the COVID-19 Computational Challenge. Our fantastic mentor is Dr. Doris Neville. In this project, we were required to create an innovative solution to determine the risk of exposure to COVID-19 locations in and around the city of Los Angeles. We proposed the composition risk score by 3 factors. source of infection, spatial density, and organ visit distribution. As a result, we find more than 30,000 area location risk scores, and we publish a dashboard, which is a dynamic visualization that you can find a detailed risk score of each location and in different days from Monday to Sunday. Thanks for listening.
Exchange student at RPI who had to return home to Spain is now using what he learned to start his own company. He's producing protective plastic shields in the fight against the spread of COVID-19. And News 10's Samantha Damasio has that story.
Listening and being there, I think I got inspired.
21-year-old Guillermo Lopez Balcells is an exchange student from Spain majoring in business administration. But when the pandemic hit, he returned home to Barcelona, taking with him the skills he learned in his entrepreneurship class at RPI.
One of those classes that you are excited to go. It's not like, oh, man, I have this class now, it's boring, but with him it was different.
He says back home in Spain, he noticed the lack of PPE and how grocery stores and pharmacies were in need of protective barriers between cashiers and customers.
And I started thinking, like, they need this.
That's when he says he decided to use the machines at his family's paper factory to cut plastic and create protective shields.
And the day after, we made some phone calls, we sent a couple of emails, people answered, and then we started, and are they willing to pay for it? And all these like little things is what we learned in his class. It was cool to see like something that I learned in class applied in the real world.
The idea took off, and he has since produced and sold more than 1,300 shields, with more in the works.
And right now we are working on this order that is going tomorrow to Madrid. It's 200.
His RPI professor, Clint Ballinger, says he's incredibly proud of Guillermo and tells me this is what teaching is all about.
It's what keeps us professors going, I think, if you could actually impact a young mind that's got a lot of potential and actually see something from it.
I told him, like, I really appreciate what you've done for us as a teacher.
Samantha Damasio, News 10, ABC.
Yeah, good for him. Good story as well.
So many people applying their skills early and to come up with simple solutions.
Entrepreneurs. Yeah.